Hi, songwriters. So there are a lot of incredibly significant things going on in the world right now. I would say over the past 6 months or so, many people have come to me wanting help writing songs about issues going on in the world. For example, people who wanted help writing songs about refugees, writing songs about domestic violence, writing songs about Me Too. And I would say in the past week, about 50% of the songwriters I'm working with are wanting to write songs about the pandemic and then songs about racism and the protests. And all of this is so heartening in a way. It's just a beautiful thing to see artists wanting to engage the issues of the day. And that really is, it's one of the things that got me interested in being creative to begin with, is that overlap between artistry and activism. So I've been trying to help people, and what I keep hearing is that everybody's feeling very daunted by it, as well they should. So I want to speak to it, and frankly, doing a coaching video about it feels rather daunting as well. I mean this to be at most the beginning of a conversation. So please, I don't claim to know. I don't claim to know the answers on this one. I never do. I never know the answers in these videos. But especially today, I hope that you'll engage with me about what it is that I speak about. Okay, so before I get into this, before I get into talking about songs of activism and allyship and songs that take on big issues, I just want to step back and talk about songwriting in general. Very often we come to our songwriting with big ideas about what we want our songs to achieve. Big ideas and big ideals. We want our songs to be heartbreaking, or we want our songs to be devastatingly funny, or we want our songs to be relevant. Now, all of this is wonderful. Our ideals are wonderful, and I don't know that we'd even be artists without them. But we've got to know they are not starting points for creative process. If you sit down to write a song that is heartbreaking, that blank page is going to stare at you like none other. It is not point A to writing a song that ends up being heartbreaking. In a sense, we have to take our ideals, we have to acknowledge them, and then we have to check them at the door. It is a different thing that is the starting point for a song. What I call this thing is the small true thing. Small true thing, TM. I always make that joke because it does feel a little gimmicky, but it is very real. It's very real. What we want is something small and something true. It's that little piece of human experience that is yours. It's that vantage point inside of you from which you're going to look out and make some sense of what you see. It is that little thing that turns your head, that little thing that you need to utter about, that you need to talk to your friend about. It's actually not an emotion. Now, emotions can be incredibly helpful in tracking small true things, because often when we're en route to them, we feel a lot. But it is not the heartbreak that is going to be the fuel for the song. Likewise, it is not the story that will end up being your lyric necessarily. Maybe there'll be a relationship between your small true thing and what you actually write in your lyric. But it is not the story itself. It's more personal than that. It's more personal than a story. It's that thing inside yourself that interested you in this song content to begin with. Now, songs of activism, songs of allyship, songs about big issues, they're no different. It feels like they must be because the stakes are so high. Now we have lives at stake. We have whole populations at stake. We have the future of the world at stake. So certainly now our ideals must be invited into the room, right? Actually, no. We still need to, in a sense, check them at the door. We still need to find a small true thing inside of ourselves to write from. Only then do we have any prayer of writing the song that has an impact, that speaks to anything that's going on in the world right now. You still have to let yourself have that honest conversation, that honest sourcing of content inside of yourself. Now there's a few things that I want to encourage you to be really careful about here. In a sense, writing a song that is not from your vantage point, writing a song, I'm speaking specifically about the allyship songs now, writing a song from a vantage point that is not yours is generous, right? You're not just all hung up in your own content that day. You're not just sourcing your own heartbreak yet again. I'm thinking of I Am an Old Woman, named after my mother, right? There's lots of incredibly beautiful examples of this, of songwriters assuming voices that are not their own. But I want you to be very careful, very, very careful about assuming the voice of someone who has been made voiceless, of assuming the voice of someone who has less privilege in a way than you do. The last thing you want to do is yet again center someone else's narrative around your narrative. So there's just a few questions that I encourage you to ask. The first is, are you avoiding your own content by sensationalizing someone else's? You've got to grant yourself your own content. You know, you've got to let that be meaningful. You've got to grant yourself the content that really is your business to be writing about. And maybe it's, in a sense, more peripheral to the issue you want to address. But if it's honest, it's going to contribute more. Second, are you actually just grappling with an issue? If you want to write about domestic violence, but you've never experienced that. If you want to write about child abuse, but you've never experienced that. If you want to write about racism, but you've never experienced that. Are you perhaps just at the beginning of an awakening around this issue? Because if you are, you gotta know that in an awakening, it's murky. There's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of not wanting to really accept that some parents harm their kids, not wanting to really accept that people of color have gone through what they've gone through in our history and continue to go through today. That resistance, it's a sign that you're doing the work. It's a good sign, but you don't want to fall into the trap of doing that resistance in what you create and put out into the world. That's actually not the song that the world needs. It's a song that resists the topic that you're purporting to support. Okay, finally, as songwriters, the world is just this buffet line of metaphors. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the sun rising is human triumph, and the tides are the constancy of the love we have for our lover, right? We walk the earth and everything is fodder for our inner worlds. Here you need to be exceptionally careful because the suffering of others is not a metaphor for your suffering. You cannot let it just be a metaphor for your suffering. Refugees are not a metaphor for your homesickness. Child abuse is not a metaphor for your parents letting you down. Racism is not a metaphor for anything, okay? You don't want to exploit these issues. You don't want to exploit these issues. And I think that this brings me to the last point I want to make today, which is actually, I think, a beautiful point, which is that in both artistry and activism, we've got to get real. We've got to get deeply real in order to do good work. As activists, as allies, we can't just condemn the racism out there, right? We've got to look at the way that we've been a part of these systems that support it and been in relationships that support it. And we've got to look for it in ourselves and do that work there. And as artists, we can't just source from the world out there, right? We've got to look out and we've got to look in. So thank you for listening. Please don't just be daunted. Please take this on. Please engage. Please write those songs that you are feeling called to write, because I think that is a true calling and a mission. And just continue the work of being a songwriter, which is about that radical honesty. Okay, take care, everybody.